I'm also happy to be called by my first name, if that's easier.
Say it again.
I'm happy to be called by my last name, Miss, or my first name is fine as well.
Okay, so I can say Miss Jericho.
Or Jericho.
Oh, Miss Jericho. Okay.
Roxy is good for me.
Yeah.
All right. I guess we're getting started right now. For thumbs up, I'll know. All right. Welcome to our 100 Town Hall, a report card on race, which is sponsored by the 100 Black Men of Prince George's County and the Coca-Cola Foundation as well. Thanks to both these organizations for serving our community. My name is Dr. Lamont Bunyan, and I serve as the president of the 100 Black Men of Prince George's County, one of the many chapters of the 100 Black Men of America Incorporated. The 100 Black Men is an organization of over 10,000 members that are dedicated to serving communities through our pillar programs of mentorship to youth, economic empowerment to communities, spreading the word on health and wellness, and of course, education and leadership. Tonight, you are in for a real treat. We have an esteemed panel that I will turn it over to in just a moment that is going to talk about a report card on race. Allow me the privilege to introduce my friend and the moderator for this evening. I'd like to introduce Don Cravens. Don Cravens serves as the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at the National Urban League, where he leads its corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. Don graduated from LSU in 1994. Upon graduation, he attended the Southern University Law Center and obtained a Juris Doctorate in 1998. In 2004, he was elected to the Louisiana House of Representatives. In 2006, he was elected to the Louisiana Senate. During his tenure in the Louisiana Senate, Don was heavily involved in the post-Hurricane Katrina issues as the chairman of the Senate Insurance Committee and was an active member of the Juvenile Justice Commission of Louisiana. In January 2009, Don left the Louisiana legislature to serve as staff director and chief counsel for the United States Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship. In January of 2013, he began serving as the chief of staff for U.S. Senator Mary L. Landrieu of Louisiana. At that time, he was the only African American chief of staff in the United States Senate. In addition to his duties at the National Urban League, Don is an adjunct professor at the George Washington University. He also serves as a major in the District of Columbia Army National Guard. Don is also a life member of the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated and a board member of the 100 Black Men of Prince George's County. Don's honors include being inducted into the Southern University Law Center Hall of Fame in 2018 and being named a distinguished alumnus of LSU. Don and his family reside in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to your moderator for tonight, Don Cravens.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bunyan. It's such a pleasure. I want to thank you for your leadership, Dr. Bunyan, and helping us to have these types of great discussions with not only our members of the 100, but also our mentees. And so thank you so much for your leadership. I also want to thank the men who lead the committee. to make these town halls possible. And so thank you, gentlemen, for all your leadership and allowing me to be a co-moderator for this wonderful, wonderful panel today, a panel that all of us as African Americans and even some of our allies who may be tuning in should find very, very, very interesting. Now, this panel is too big for just one moderator, Dr. Bunyan. We needed some help. I couldn't do this. We've got two powerful women on this panel tonight. I needed some backup. And so I asked no other than mentee Justin Clendenin to be our co-moderator. And I'm so proud. I've gotten a chance to know this young man over the past couple of weeks, and he is just a phenomenal young leader. And I just can't wait to see him bloom into a success story, another 100 Black men success story. Justin is a 19-year-old sophomore who attends Prince George's Community College. He currently majors in general studies in pursuit of his associate's degree. He's taking steps to also transfer to the University of Maryland College Park this fall semester in 2022. Now, he's got three interests for majors when he transfers: law, information technology, and business. Now, as a lawyer, I know where I'm going to try to push him, but he's such a brilliant young man. He could do any or all of those things and chart his own path, whatever he decides to do. So again, he plans to major probably in information science and maybe minor in law when he transfers. He's ambitious. He's smart. He soaks up information like a sponge. I enjoyed talking to him this week, but he also educated me on a whole lot too. I don't think sometimes our mentees understand how much you do for us, and you educate us as well. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to personally introduce my co-moderator for tonight, mentee of the 100 Black Men of Prince George's County, Justin Clendenin. Justin.
Hey, thanks for the introduction, Mentor Cravens. I really appreciate it. I just want to thank everyone. I just want to thank the audience for joining us this evening. I want to thank President Bunyan. I want to thank our panelists. And I also want to thank Coca-Cola for sponsoring us. Now, speaking of our panelists, we have two prestigious panelists with us. We have Miss Jerica L. Richardson and Miss Roxy and Debu Madu. Now, I do understand there's a lot of fellow mentees on the call and mentors and other listeners just in general. So if you two wouldn't mind, could you please give us a brief around 2-minute bio of yourselves and tell us what you do, beginning with Miss Jerica L. Richardson? You're on mute.
You would think by now I would have mastered that in the pandemic. Well, I just wanted to say thank you, Justin and Don and Dr. Bunyan and all of the members and mentees of the 100 for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. As was mentioned before, I am Jerica Richardson, and I serve as a Senior Vice President for Equitable Justice and Strategic Initiatives at the National Urban League. You know, I feel privileged to serve under Don's leadership as well as our President and CEO, Mark Morial. I lead the National Urban League's really division that's focused on social justice and equity. We work hand in hand with our Washington Bureau, but I will say we're a fairly new division at the League. We all know that justice and civil rights and equity has really been part of the fabric of the National Urban League since its founding. But one of the things that we really saw in 2020 was a social justice uprising around the tragic deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many others. We saw with the pandemic, really the veil being pulled back. And there were so many in this country that really were awakened to so many of the things I know many of us know have existed in, you know, the United States for generations. Racism, you know, lack of diversity in thought and opportunity. And so it really is a privilege to now be in this role. I started my career out after law school serving as a legal and political journalist at ABC News. Then I segued into government and worked for the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. So it was a privilege to be a spokesperson for the Justice Department in that capacity. Then I worked for the city of New York, first in the mayor's office, and then for the nation's largest independent police oversight agency, the Civilian Complaint Review Board. So I've had the privilege to work in spaces where we could talk about issues like the ones we're discussing tonight. And I'm really looking forward to tonight's discussion. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Now I'd like to allow Ms. Roxy Ndebumadu to tell us about her illustrious background.
Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you so much to members of 100 Black Men. Thank you, Dr. Bunyan. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Coca-Cola, for sponsoring. It is such an honor to be here this evening, and I'm just so excited for this conversation. My name is Roxy Ndebumadu. I have grown up and been in the Prince George's County area for, I want to say, about 29 years now. I'm telling on myself a little bit with my age there. I'm a proud graduate of Howard University. I studied healthcare and nursing at Howard University many years ago. After that, I transitioned into the tech industry, went on to work for Microsoft, currently focused on some work with Amazon. I work for an Amazon-owned company called Twitch. So for any of you that are maybe a bit younger, you might be familiar with the platform and online streaming. Really, my role at Twitch, I serve as the chief of staff for trust and safety. So really what I do is I focus on online harms. So harms that happen on the internet that affect disproportionate communities differently, and what the platform can be doing to react and combat against those different harms that we're seeing and the trends that we're seeing there, and how we can be supportive of marginalized communities. And that's what I do. Apart from that, in 2019, I was elected to Bowie City Council. So I am one of the youngest, I am not one of the, but I am the youngest elected woman to the Bowie City Council here in Bowie, Maryland, where I represent about 70,000 constituents. I have been elected since 2019. And I've been I'll be serving a 4-year term. And really in my role as council member, I really focus on a lot of legislative issues that affect the community differently. So a lot of the local issues, but I do have the honor of working with various members of our General Assembly, our Congress, United States Senate, all on up to the executive branch on various issues that impact our community differently. So I'm very, very excited for this conversation. I think I have a different insight to bring, and I think it's going to be really, really exciting, and I'm excited to learn from you all.
Well, Roxy, thank you so much, and thank you for your service. One of the things, I'm going to go off script real quick, because something I noticed at the very beginning, both you and Jerica, both our city councilwoman and Jerica, you both had stints in government and are currently serving publicly. So you have a role in your private work and your professional work, but at some point in your career, you thought it was important to be in government. And even though those of us on this Zoom tonight, on this meeting tonight, we may be in different political camps, so we may come from different political backgrounds. At some points during our lives, me included, we thought that public service mattered. Can we just talk about that? Because I want our mentees to see and hear. We hear so much about government, what it does and doesn't do, but at some point, both of you thought it was important to get involved.
Well, I can chime in here. Thank you for the question. You know, Don, I think public service is critically important, and it's something that we all can do. I mean, there's a diversity of opportunities. We all have a diversity of talents. And I often think we are, when we are not in the space of government, there's a lot that we observe and that we experience really just being everyday citizens on the ground. And I think it's important to bring those real everyday experiences to government and the work. We want to make sure that we are connecting the dots between the policies that we are putting forth in government to make sure they are actually having real, measurable, and meaningful results for the community. So often we can be in spaces where folks become disconnected from the community, and we are not hearing the voice of the community and really addressing some of the issues that folks really, really care about. And so I saw government as a privilege and an opportunity to share my own personal experiences. I was disenfranchised at age 18 when I was a freshman at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. That was one of those things that stood with me. And I thought about what happened that day, how I felt the system had failed me. And instead of really turning that, I think, moment that could have deterred me from getting involved in the political process at all, I use it as an opportunity to take my lived experience and go into government, go into journalism and all these other areas, but really to advocate for people who have felt left out, who have felt shut out, who have felt disenfranchised. And so I think service is something that we all can do at some point. And so I encourage, especially not only the members, but really the mentees on the call to consider that no matter what issue you care about, which area of expertise you may have, there is a place for you in government.
I want to.
Councilwoman?
I was gonna say I want to plus one everything that Jerica said, and I'm just gonna. Hopefully you're okay with my vulnerability this evening, because that's where I'm going to go with this. It's crazy. Today I wrote a post on LinkedIn earlier this morning because I was like on my way to DC and I was driving. So I had a busy day at work today, and I was like reflecting. And yesterday I like bursted out into tears because I was having the most stressful day, and I was facing some challenges in the community where I was just like, I don't know if I'm the person for this job. And so recently, 2 weeks ago, I had spent some time in Colorado and Aspen because I had got selected for this fellowship. I became a Rodell Fellow with Aspen Institute. And really what we do with the Rodell Fellowship is we focus on really just understanding and intersecting the different layers of leadership. And when I got in that room, I said to myself, I don't really look like a lot of these people. And I also don't have the same experience as a lot of these people. We don't sound the same. We're not in the same industries. We don't lead the same way. Why am I here? Like, what am I really doing here? And so later on in the conversation, 2 days later, it was a 3-day seminar. We started talking about religion and politics, which is a very contentious topic. And we were talking about like how different people legislate and lead differently. And I had started sharing my story, and mind you, this is a group of Caucasian people. I started sharing my story, and we were talking about the Constitution and when the Constitution was written and the fact that women were not in the room, the fact that Black people were not in the room. And I was sharing my story about how I grew up and how the laws thereof have affected me differently. And I just bursted out into tears and I started crying. And at the end of that session, so many members of that room walked up to me and said, you know what, Roxy, your story struck a chord with me. And I feel like I have some things to go home and think about now. Like there's some uncomfortable things that I now need to sit with from where I sit and as a legislator in my community who does have African Americans in my community that I need to think about and reapproach. And I realized in that moment, that's why I'm in that room. That's why I was placed in that room. And so the reason why I share that story with you and why I'm being vulnerable in that way, and it almost brings me to tears, is because being a public servant is not easy. It's hard. It's very, very difficult. But at the end of the day, there's a reason why you're needed in those rooms. That perspective, that context, that insight that you bring, those lived experiences are so critical to what's going to be necessary to continue to move our society forward in ways that you will not even be able to imagine. And I think for a lot of people on this call, you have that tenacity, you have that hope, you have that perseverance from the things that you have struggled through to be able to be at the places and sit where you are today in a society that was not designed for you, to be able to share that context and bring that into those rooms where we have traditionally not been welcome. And so I leave you with the fact that public service is 100% necessary and is 100% important. And in order for us to continue to see this change that we want to see, that we're holding government accountable, we need people like you in the room. And don't think of yourself like, oh, but I'm not a public servant. I'm not a politician. I don't look like one. That's not me. It can't be me. I thought that too before I got into elected office. And then I ran and then I won because the community felt differently. So that could be you too.
That's phenomenal. Thank you both. I thank you. Couldn't say any more about it. Thank you so much for your service and for that. So I want to talk a little bit about our title tonight. The title of this panel, as Dr. Bunyan introduced at the beginning, is A Report Card on Race, How Far We've Come and How Far We Have to Go. I want to start with some good news tonight, because a lot of times when we talk about the African-American community, we go straight to the ills and the problems and the concerns. But I want to level set. I would like you to talk to us tonight about what is some of the good news. When we talk about how far we've come, how far have we come? I'll share a personal story, Roxy, we're being vulnerable. My grandfathers and grandmothers, but my grandfather served in World War II, was a very proud World War II veteran. When he got back to Louisiana in the 1940s from serving his country, he had to wait 20 years, almost 20 years to vote before he and my grandmothers, my other grandparents, could vote. My father and I both served in the Louisiana legislature. We actually served together. We're the only father and son to serve at the same time. He was a senator, I was a representative. I consider that progress, that his father couldn't vote until he was well into his 40s. I was a state senator in my 30s. And so I think there is progress. The fact that you're the youngest woman on the council ever, I look at that as progress. What are some of the ways the country has come forward. And I'm going to start with you, Councilwoman, that we can be proud of when it comes to race.
I think the first one I would be remiss to say, if I didn't say, is the fact that Prince George's County is the wealthiest African-American county in the country. Like that in itself, that you have so many educated, smart, intellectual, successful African-Americans in one county that has a population of upwards of 900,000 people, with the majority being African-American in the population, in itself is progress. In itself is showing you that African-Americans are making strides, whether people want to believe it or not. Like, I've never seen anything like that. And there's no other state in the United States, there's no other place in the United States that can claim such a statistics like we can here in Prince George's County. So that's the first one. The second one that I want to say is we just seen an African-American woman be nominated to the Supreme Court and confirmed. That is huge. That is absolutely huge. And if you watch the confirmation hearings like I did, I don't know about you, but I watched them. And that was a hard couple of hours to watch in a few days. The fact that the perseverance and just the grace that Justice Ketanji Brown displayed during that effort was monumentally huge. But that's something that we do every single day. So that in itself is progress. I think there are so many examples. We have Vice President Kamala Harris. That in itself is huge. We have I'm the first African-American woman to represent District 4 in the city of Bowie, which is a 65% African-American district. In itself is crazy. But I don't want to sit here and just call out the first, because I think people do have a way of just focusing on, oh, the first. But what I do want to highlight is we have so many successful Black people doing wonderful and monumental things, whether that's based off of our HBCUs that are making huge strides. I mean, look at the HBCU law settlement that just happened a few months ago. Like, there are a number of strides that are happening in the community. And I would definitely say they're all from our effort. They're all from us getting together, us demanding change, us holding each other accountable, and us saying, enough's enough. We're going to get together and we're going to support each other and we're going to keep going. So I want us to acknowledge all of that progress. And I'm sure there are stories that I'm not covering here and that I'm not touching on that we can go on for hours about. But there's so much progress that we could touch on that we're making, that we have to be grateful and that we have to be proud about, that we are doing off the strengths of our backs, that we can be proud about.
Thank you. Jerica, what are some good news? What's some good news when it comes to race in America?
Well, I want to second everything Roxy said, because those are accomplishments that really stand out for me. Yes, to Ketanji Brown Jackson. I mean, it was just, I think, so powerful for so many of us to see a competent, intelligent, hardworking woman that has been committed, Black woman that has been committed to public service, succeed and get her just due and really be put in a position to shape where this country goes, shape how courts, evaluate so many of the challenging issues that I know we all are fighting for on the day-to-day. So that was powerful. I would be remiss if I did not, lift up Vice President Kamala Harris. I'm getting ahead of myself. But I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So, I have to shout her out. Those gains and representation. And when we're looking at elected officials across the country, just seeing the rise in Black mayors and Black power, it's just so inspirational. You name a seat, a role, a position, we are breaking glass ceilings and doing the work. And I think what's even more powerful for me is when you see the continuum, not just the first, as Roxy pointed out, but those who are doing an amazing job and keeping that door open so that another one can come behind us. So I think that's incredible. And the only other thing I would add is I'm just really so inspired by our communities and the coalition building that we have seen, especially of late. I mean, it's cultural for us. We get together, we work together. I know we were going to be joined by one of my sisters in the movement, Ebony from National Action Network. And I mean, that partnership that we have with the National Action Network, NAACP, and NAN, and so many other legacy civil rights organizations has been so powerful for me in this moment. But I also think the good news is the way we've all been inspired by our young folks and our young generation. For the mentees that are on this call, I mean, you all have come up with amazing ways to take the progress we've made in the civil rights movement, the tactics that we have learned, in the 1950s and the 1960s and 70s, and you're constantly building upon it and innovating it. You are taking the movement further and further every single day. So to me, that's the progress. The ability to look back at this election that we saw in 2020 with record turnout, we are really showing up and showing out. And that's so meaningful to me. And I will say the last thing I will add is I know, and I'm so glad, Don, that you started on a positive note, but I will say we have to acknowledge some of the trauma that we have gone through and see where we are today. I had the opportunity in my career to support the family of Eric Garner and really push with and fight for there to be more accountability. We didn't get everything we wanted, but I am proud to be a part of the team that had the independent investigation, independent prosecution, and got the police officer that took his life so unjustly fired from the police department. But then we look at today and we see that we had a conviction, a criminal conviction in the case of the tragic death of George Floyd. And we saw Derek Chauvin convicted for those crimes and taking a life. And so that is progress in the space of accountability that I think our community has been needed for so long. And so, I'm really, heartened that we are taking our anguish and we are turning it into action. So, I definitely see those as highlights of where we've succeeded and continue to move the needle.
Definitely, and I definitely like how you mentioned the younger Generation Z. I'm part of that, and you see it on social media, you see it on the news. You got young entrepreneurs, business owners. We're all doing our different things. YouTube, there's just so much money out here, and we're all just going for it. There's so much more opportunities. You have DoorDash, Grubhub, and it's just amazing, honestly. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to kind of play the good cop, bad cop here. Mentor Craven started off with something good. I do have to ask you both, what are some areas you feel as though America has work to do? We have all these, racial instances, racial disparities, a lot of controversy. What are some key areas that we really need to work on? And I'll begin with Councilwoman Ndebumat.
Let me start for a second by zooming out before I answer the question and just give you my perspective on what I've been seeing lately. I think that when it comes to race in America, I do think that there is 100% a divide that's happening at this current time. And I see it a lot in the community. I see it a lot in the rooms that I sit in when there's conversations about progress and what does progress look like and what does the community want and what do Black people want? What is it that we need to do to correct the wrongs of America? And I'm paraphrasing here. And from where I sit, I observe these comments and these conversations, and I just try to understand where this context is coming from. Like, why are people responding this way? I do think that there's a lot of fragility that's going on, 100%. I think there's a lot of fear that's going on right now in the community. And I do feel like a lot of people are in this place where they feel like in order to acknowledge African Americans and the systematical wrongs that have been written into America, that you're somehow taking from what has been mine for so long that would arguably never have been yours. And so I wanted to zoom out and provide that context, because that's kind of what I see sometimes when I sit in these rooms and we start getting into these conversations of what areas does America have work to do, and with the people that in terms of that have the ability and that have the power to make this change, it becomes a conversation about fear and fragility. It really does. And so there's that. areas that America still has work to do. I don't necessarily feel that America has actually heard African Americans and what it is that the community is actually saying. I don't necessarily feel that the leaders that are elected, because I'm going to place a lot of onus on elected leaders here, because they do have a lot of responsibility here. Because when you talk about constitutional change, there are people that are entrusted with the Constitution to enact the Constitution. And I do think there's a lot of responsibility on that side. I do think that a lot of leaders haven't begun to hear the problems and really understand what we're actually really asking for and what we believe equity, not equality, equity really looks like, to be able to get to an equilibrium that actually makes sense. There are a lot of things that are wrapped up into that. You have gun violence, you have the criminal justice system, you have the housing market, you have inequities when it comes to financial institutions, you have access to funding, you have schools, access to school, admissions to school that's disproportionately allocated. There are so many things that we have to do when it comes to the actual playing field of the success of African Americans that we have to address as a community. And when I say we have to address, that doesn't mean that we haven't begun to address them. Yeah, there's been some things that have been done, but there's still a lot of things that we have to do. You talked about Generation Z and being more entrepreneurial driven and taking advantage of a lot of these things that are out there, like the creator economy, and wanting to take success into your own hands. Well, a lot of that is happening because a lot of people don't want to go into student loan debt. And a lot of people don't really want to hit bankruptcy before they even get a chance to actually flourish and succeed. And people do know that if you're Black and when you graduate, that your loans are not going to look the same as Sally's loans. We all kind of know that, and we all kind of see that in our various experiences. Now, there are some of us that are able to find different avenues and are awarded certain opportunities to be able to escape that. But that's not the even playing field for everybody. So I do think that there's a lot of work that we have to do when it comes to access, when it comes to equity, when it comes to making sure that people do have access to funding for your entrepreneurial endeavors. When you talk about Black wealth, when you talk about the financial system and the discrimination that happens there in the housing market, or whether that's with lending or financial institutions, when you talk about the online market, I mean, the hate that I see that happens towards African American communities on the internet in itself is completely different from what happens towards other marginalized communities, and it's 100% uncalled for. But we have a lot to do when it comes to equity and when it comes to just that baseline there. But we also have a lot to do to make sure that we're holding people accountable to actually hear what it is we're saying. This is not a situation where we feel or we're sad or what, like that's not the conversation that we're trying to have here. We're trying to address wrongs that have been ingrained in a lifetime, that we're trying to really make sure that we get equity and we provide access for all. So I think those are some of the things that I see from where I sit.
Yeah, and it all comes down to money, right? You mentioned a lot about wealth and whatnot. And that's definitely a big disparity in the country. Ms. Richardson, do you have anything to add from what Councilwoman said?
Yes, I mean, I think the Councilwoman did a great job laying out the many issues that we need to address in this country. And I put the emphasis on many because there are quite a few. But I think it's also important to take a step back and really talk about where we need to start. And we need a starting point. And for me, I see the starting point as truth telling, really being honest about the history of this country, being honest about what has happened to Black and Brown and Indigenous and Asian and other marginalized communities from the very beginning, from its very inception. And I know there has been a lot of pushback of late about that, but if we don't have an honest conversation, if we don't make sure that Generation Z and those coming behind them are educated about what this country has done and has not done for so many wonderful people, for so many wonderful communities that have contributed so much to it, then I don't think we could even get to the place of really having the type of equity and access and opportunity that we want. What we will have is, representation here and there. You will have some folks that are able to be the beneficiaries and continue to grow and move and evolve. But we will always have a class of people in our community that will be left behind because we've never actually engaged in the honest dialogue that needs to be happening, the recognition that needs to happen about so many of the atrocities that have happened in this country. Like, what we really need to focus on is restorative justice. And I also think we need to make sure that our communities are made whole. You can't talk about equity if you're never on an even playing field. So having an honest conversation is critically important. And one thing I'd like to add, so many times when people ask this question, we feel a huge responsibility as people of color in this country to be the one to come up with the solutions and the answers. But that responsibility is on America as a whole itself, and as one of the constant perpetuators of racism and bigotry and discrimination. This can't be a conversation where you go to the Black people in the room or the brown people in the room and ask them, how can we fix things? How do we solve these problems? Yes, those closest to the solutions, to the problems are close or to the solutions, but this education that needs to happen in this country is critical. And the entire country, all of America, needs to take ownership of the wrongs that have been committed and really focus on how we move forward, how we can be honest about that history so that we can right them.
Very well said, ladies. Jerry, I heard recently someone say, don't put the burden on the burdened, right?
Mm-hmm.
It should not just be our burden to fix the inequities in this country. Yes, we can come up with the solutions. We know what the recommendation should be because we're closest to the problem, but we can't fix it without our white brothers and sisters and our Latino brothers and sisters and Asian, and we can do it as a family, as an American family. So thank you so much. You talk about some of the
on the government and really government sanctioned discrimination. We can look back in our history at redlining. So when we're talking about folks that are doing well in Prince George's County and in other places, we could also trace the history and look back and see that when we look at so many of our urban centers and communities where we have pockets of our population that are struggling and really are not living and breathing and feeling the promise of America, it's because they have been held back and it has been strategic. We have not gotten the same benefits as everyone else. No matter how hard we have pursued education and entrepreneurship, there has always been at every turn some government sanctioned program that has really been put in place to hold folks back. And I know and I see that we're breaking through that cycle, but those are some of the challenges that I think our communities are still working to get through and move forward. And, Don, you and I work at the National Urban League. We know how important economic empowerment is for our communities. And there's a lot that we need to do to close this gap. And I will say that we talked about it a little bit earlier, but getting involved in engaging in public service is critically important. We have to have a seat at the table, every table, not just in government, but all tables of power, because this problem is impacting us in so many ways, in a myriad of ways. And wealth is just one indication of that, but it's sometimes the thing that makes it even harder for us to advance because so many things are tied to economic opportunity in this country.
Jerica, you talked about some of those systems. I know young people hear about that sometimes, about systemic racism. I want to give two examples that I heard recently mentioned. I talked about my grandfather who served in World War II. What created a white middle class in this country, which a lot of us know, some of us don't know, was the GI Bill, right? When those men and women came back from World War II, they had an opportunity to go to college for free with their GI Bill. Many young people still use that today. But for the African-American community, they didn't get that opportunity. of the first 3,000 GI Bill allotments that were given after World War II, two went to African American veterans. And if you think about the fact that many of our African Americans weren't even near a school, the schools were segregated, so you couldn't go to public schools, white public schools. So if you didn't have an HBCU near you, you couldn't have used that GI Bill anyway. When Social Security, and I know many of you, Justin, aren't even thinking about Social Security, but when Social Security was created, which is a safety net for people when they retire, farmers and domestic workers were not allowed to participate in Social Security. Now think about who was doing farm work and who were doing the domestic works in this country. Who were the maids and those people who look like us. And so I think, Jerica, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's some of that systemic that sometimes we were held back. And then when people say, well, pull yourselves up by the bootstraps, you're sitting there going, but you never gave me boots, so you didn't give me good straps. And so, Councilwoman, you're close. I know you're a tech lady in your professional world, woman in your professional world, but you're also close to the community in your political role. What, in your opinion, created some of this wealth gap, and what are you seeing on the ground as maybe keeping it or perpetuating it? And how do we change that? And what are you maybe doing to try to change it?
I think Jerica said a lot of great things. And I think one thing that I want to underscore and continue to highlight is definitely economic opportunity. And I think a lot of it intersects. Like a lot of the things that I see in corporate America, they very much so intersect into public service, and they very much so share the same learnings. Because when it comes time for the community, and particularly my community, since we are a majority African American community, when it comes time for my residents and constituents to start applying for jobs, they don't have the same process. They're not afforded with the same opportunities. They're not told about the same jobs and the same pay, the tactics, or the same types of ways to negotiate, or the types of ways to get into some of these rooms that have been hoarded, or been this access that has been kept from the community for so long. So that's insight and learnings that they just don't have access to be able to know how to apply that learning individually in a way that best serves them to be able to achieve that economic opportunity. So I think it's a lot of that. It's the same thing. Like when you think about, and I'll give this specific example because I know there are a lot of young folks on the phone, and I don't want to scare you, but when you think about some of these systems, and when you're applying to jobs and you're submitting your resume, a lot of these systems are asking you what your race is and how you identify and how you classify. There is some things that are going on there. There are some setbacks that are going on there, which is not at all in any way fair. And so those are things that I do see that hinder Black people from being able to get into the room and hinder us from being able to get the opportunity to be able to reach economic opportunity in the first place, to be on an even playing field, to even reach the idea of equity. And so when I talk to my constituents, and when I spend a lot of time with them to understand how can we help, what is the role what role do you see government, especially local government, because it's tougher for local government because a lot of things we don't necessarily have oversight over. So in often cases, we are serving as that intermediary and trying to leverage the budget that we do have to be able to stand up programs that support the community in different ways. One of the things that we did last year in particular, two of the things that we did in particular last year in my community, one was we did partner with Coursera to be able to kind of provide different skill pathways to the community for people that really wanted to pivot jobs and pivot industries. And the partnership that we had with Coursera was very exclusive to the fact that once a resident or constituent did complete that certification, that they would potentially, dependent on the type of certification that they completed, they would then pair them directly with a recruiter that would give them the opportunity to interview for a job. That is giving access. Like that was the specific deal that we made with Coursera. Another opportunity that we made was Rosetta Stone. Okay, you said that you want to do a lot when it comes to George Floyd, and you say that you want to show up for the Black community. Okay, cool. So give us your service for free. Like, why don't you come and give it access to our community for free, so that Black people can learn more languages too, since that's not a focus when we're in school at younger ages. That's not a focus to tell you how valuable that may be later on in life, or how that skill set could help you earn more, or whatever you want to do with that. So we did partner with Rosetta Stone, and they did give us 5,000 or 10,000 licenses. I don't remember the specific number, but they did give us free licenses for the community to be able to access for 1 year to be able to learn more languages and to be able to integrate better and to be able to get ahead in the ways that they wanted to be able to specifically. And so I think with local government, the ways that we're trying to look at, and in addition to that, what we have done is we've looked at a lot of our policies and a lot of our legislation and looked at the wording and some of the ways that they are written to make sure that they are actually inclusive, that they actually are thinking and making sure and keeping Black people in mind and at the center of the intention of the legislation, and not doing things to circumvent the success or the economic opportunity or the opportunity in general of the flourishing of the Black population. So those are some of the things that we've done, and we work really, really closely with our diversity committee that does take a lot of that on. And specifically in Bowie, we have seen a few examples of just hate violence, candidly, where people have started to show signs of fear that we are taking on a more proactive stance as combating some of these things and saying, hey, we do stand for equity and we are going to focus on the Black community and we are going to promote the flourishing of the Black community. And if that's something that you don't like, then I don't really know what to tell you, because that's the stance that we've taken as a council. And so I think that we do have a lot of work to do. We are definitely making progress, but I think it's tough, and recognizing the role of local government, because we definitely do try to assist in the ways that we can by making sure that when we are in those rooms, we are advocating for the community the way that we need to advocate, specifically in this scenario, that's the Black community, making sure that we are a voice in the room, that we are holding other legislators and our congressmen and our senators and all those of the above accountable to what the promises are that they have made to our community and the constituents that we represent.
I thought it was really interesting how the three of you all mentioned jobs. I was speaking to a woman recently, and she made a very interesting point. She mentioned that the reason why, we in the Black community typically have to highly educate ourselves is because the most highly educated Black person is only seen as the equivalent to an average white person, which is why that same, we learn different languages, we get into IT, business, law, and then you might see a white individual who doesn't have nearly as much of a well-versed background be competitive with you in that field, and simply because of the color of your skin. So that's just really interesting. I really enjoy how all three of you mentioned that. And so that kind of brings me to the next question, somewhat of a socially just society, right? So we all have this expectation. We all talk about a socially just system, but what does that really look like? In your eyes, what does a socially just society look like? Is that something that's reasonably achieved? Is that something where the system needs to be restarted? I know my generation of, especially on social media, there's a lot of the system needs to be destroyed or completely abolished and reformed. You have police reform people, you have people take it all away. What does a socially just society look like to you? And is it something that is a reasonable thing to be achieved? We'll begin with Ms. Richardson.
Well, thank you for the question, Justin. I will say a socially just society is one where everyone has a voice. And I don't think that is a place we are quite in right now, but I think it is something that we are working towards and we are aspiring to. And I definitely think it's achievable. I just look at what we've seen in 2020 and the pandemic, that we have seen so many people, really use their voices and lend their voices to so many important causes in our community. And that has helped move the needle. It has changed the conversation. It has actually started the conversations that need to be had a long time ago. So I think a society that's socially just includes space for everyone to have a voice. And it's also a society that would include diversity of thought, not just color, but thought, ideas. And I think any society where you have a diversity of ideas, a diversity of people with different backgrounds and knowledge and skill set is a strong, productive society, one where it will constantly evolve and improve and move forward. I'm hopeful. I think we can get there. but it really is going to require the commitment of each and every generation to invest in the work and be part of the change. I mean, that's how I would characterize a socially just society.
Yeah, teamwork is a dream work, right? We all have to play our role. We're all from different generations. We're all on this panel together talking because the issue isn't just one generation or the next. It's all of us. We're all Black at the end of the day. We all face the same things, or we all have the possibility of facing the same things. If we're pulled over on the highway, the color of our skin is what possibly determines what might happen, right? It's not necessarily our age. And so, Ms. Ndebumadu, do you have any more points? You want to add anything?
I think that was absolutely beautifully said. I think the only thing that I would add is something that I often tell people when they ask me questions that are similar, or they try to attach labels or whatever they try to attach to many people these days. I like to remind people, before you attach this idea of me that you have in this head, whether that's the SVP or whether that's the chief of staff or whether that's the council member or the elected official or whatever it is label that you have assigned to me, understand that I'm a Black person first. I'm a woman first before that. And I have all of these experiences that contribute to my lived experiences that you may not understand, that dictate my outcome before I even step into the room. So understand that while you're busy assigning me all of those labels, I have those two things that I have to live through that are very separate to any other label that doesn't define who I am. And so I think that it's spot on what Jerica said. It is a society where everybody feels heard. It's a society where there's diversity of thought, where there's shared understanding, where people are actually willing to listen and understand and potentially be the bigger person in the room and remove their possible bias from the equation to learn and seek to understand the experiences of other people so that we can have a shared understanding of where it is that we need to go to be in this together.
Well said. Thank you, ladies, very much. I want to let the audience know that you're welcome to submit some questions. We're getting towards the end, and there may be a question or two that we can ask from the audience. We'd love to do that. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you, ladies, you mentioned, Roxy, that you're a Black woman, and we've been talking about race generally. We've been talking about the African-American race and some of the ills, but I want to talk to you as women. This is one of the questions that we've received from the audience. As women, more specifically Black women, what are some of the inequities you face, unique inequities that you face, and some of the tips you can give some of our young women who may be listening tonight to aid them and to empower them in today's society? I'll start with you, Councilwoman.
I had a challenge the other day at work where, I had received some feedback where it was like, you're really good at networking and you're really good at creating relationships and getting in the right rooms, but I'm not sure if you execute. And it went further on. But there was this idea in that conversation where my abilities, my accomplishments, and the fact that it takes a certain level of skill set to be able to enter some of the rooms that I've been able to enter and hold the attention of some of the people that I've been able to attention to, even be able to influence at the level and the impact that I've been able to influence, for people to be able to diminish my skill set so quickly and my accomplishments so quickly because I am a Black woman. And I know a lot of people in the audience, or sometimes the feedback I get is, well, how do you know that's a Black woman? How do you know that's attributed? Because I watch a lot of women around me and they are not treated the same. The playing field and the measurements are not the same. They are never the same. And oftentimes when I do walk into rooms, whether that's in corporate America or whether that's in the government space, because these industries are heavily male dominated and also white male dominated. And you're starting to see increased diversities from white women as well. There's just a different set of measurements. There's a different level of expectation. And you talked about this a little bit earlier, Justin, where you're expected to perform at a different level. And it doesn't matter if I have all of these qualifications, and to somebody else that's seen as just the minimal for somebody else of a different race and a different gender. And so what I say to a lot of the women on this phone is, one, watch Michelle Obama's Becoming documentary, because I watch that every time I get down, because it has really inspired me and encouraged me in a way, because people will definitely, throughout your time in life, they will definitely try you. They will definitely try to minimize you. They will definitely try to diminish you. And oftentimes it will have nothing to do with you as a person. It will have nothing to do with who you are or anything to do with anything personal on how they receive you. But it will have everything to do with the fact that they can't always handle your light. They can't always handle the fact that Black women are rising, and there is something very unique about Black girl magic that a lot of people just don't understand yet. And so I encourage you and I urge you to just keep going and have faith in yourself and know that you are your biggest advocate, and understand that there is a community of Black women around you that support you and will continue to support you, that have been in these circumstances and that have been in these rooms, that will always offer guidance, always offer feedback and suggestions to be able to make sure that you are as successful as we, and that you continue to surpass us for the times to come.
Definitely. I like how, it seems like you kind of are for, Black women sticking together. And I really like that, Black power, right? You hear all the time the saying, birds of a feather flock together. I definitely want to encourage everyone as well to hang with people who carry your same energy, if you want to talk about that, right? I've been in situations, I've seen people change, actually. I graduated high school 2 years ago. So, class of 2020, we've been through this pandemic, COVID time, transferring. I'm about to be a junior in college. And I've noticed, you really are really just about 5 people away from how you could really turn out. And so if you want to be a certain way, if you want to make the change, if you want to be the change, you need to hang out with people who are about that life, if you will, if you want to say it like that. You need to, yeah, you need to hang out with people who have that same mindset, because at the end of the day, if you don't, you're going to lower yourself and you won't feel as enthusiastic about your beliefs.
Amen.
Definitely. And, how do you all feel about taking a shift? We talk about sticking together, but I do want to bring us back to, I think, something that's very interesting. That's violence within the Black community. I think that we're also separated in our own Black community as well. We face racism from an outside perspective, but also there's things that are happening inside the community that are separating us. And so how do you all feel about Black violence and how it's viewed, how we're presented in the media? Blacks, we seem to be presented in the media only when there's something negative, right? So how do you feel about how we're presented in the media and what's truly going on?
I'll take that question, Justin. As someone who was a former broadcast journalist, I definitely, this is something that I've wrestled with a lot. We can't discount how powerful images we see in the media are on our psyche. And I would say that, oftentimes we can have these conversations and talk about how the rest of the world is seeing Black people. But I think it's also important to see and talk about how we are seeing ourselves, because we are digesting those same images. Oftentimes, we are seen in a violent manner. We are seen as the villain in a film. I mean, whether you're talking about the news or you're just talking about entertainment television, there is not enough diversity in the images of our people in media and in this space. And so what happens is people develop bias, or they associate Black people with less than, other, less than human, cold, calculating, not caring about others. And so I think we have a huge responsibility to shape the images that we see on TV. We can't rely on everyone else to do that. And so it's critically important that we tell our stories. And whenever you have an opportunity, whether you're a producer, whether you're a reporter, or whether you're someone that's, involved in a conversation or on a panel, whatever, to tell the story of our community, talk about the diversity of our community, highlight the great things that we've accomplished, but also our resilience in addressing so many of these challenges. And, you know, the broader community, Caucasians need to hear it, other races need to hear it, but we need to hear it too. There are so many wonderful people, Black people, that are doing amazing things and doing amazing things to uplift the community, and we need to highlight them more. We suffer from implicit bias too. We can talk about police shootings. We can talk about crime in our communities. We can talk about violence. But there are Black people that will clutch their purse when they see another Black person walking down the street, and it's because of what we are ingesting day in and day out. And so we have to change that. I think it's critically important.
Yeah, there's definitely a disproportionate representation in the media of Blacks. You know, when you just like watch Netflix, if you're just bored, you know, you just watch whoever is the villain in the show, it always seems to be a Black person, right? You know, isn't that, I'm sure we all find that odd, but I mean, it's weird, you know, it's crazy, you know, and that representation of us just gives off the immediate bias that, oh, you see a group of Black women or Black men walking down the street, you want to walk on the other side because something might happen. You know, it gives us that look as though we're violent. And so I do want to involve Councilwoman Ndebu Madu. What are your thoughts on this?
You know, this is something I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about, and I think Jerica said it absolutely phenomenally. And as somebody who has that journalism background in that context, like that was just so insightful for me to learn your perspective. I've thought about this a lot in the way that it pertains to the education system, because I think there's some duality in roles here when you can think about the media, because I think that's a cultural norm that has been around for years that people have just profited off of, quite frankly, off of this cultural norm that has been perpetuated and just been created and has been exacerbated over time. Then you have this component of it where that culture has now been infused into an educational system, and I'm going to highlight public education in particular, has been infused into a public education system where that has become the norm in the culture, where there's kind of like this fragmented sense of community among the Black community, where it does become so easy to resort to violence. There are a number of different reasons why that is. And I know we're not going to be able to get into that. Some could argue it's the household makeup, household dynamics, access to certain things to support the household structure and the family structure. Some could say that's the education system and not having the correct support system in place there. Some could say that's a lack of access to flourishing. There's so many different ways that you can look at that. But I think the way that I've started to think about it as a local elected official and some things that we can do, I started to think about like, because I think about the next generation a lot, maybe because I'm closest in age to them. I don't know. But I think about it a lot in the sense of like, what can we do to like instill this sense of knowledge and this sense of community, this sense of like perseverance and excitement and a shift in narrative and a shift in culture with the way that the younger generation is currently perceiving education and perceiving social norms that propels some of this communal violence, that propels some of this behavior towards one another. I do think that when I look back and reflect on some of the stories that I listened to from my mom is 65 years old. I don't necessarily know that this level of violence that existed within the community, within the Black community, was at the same level when she was younger as it is today. Now around this age group and where we are today, and when I was growing up. And so what we've been working on, some of the things that me and my team have been working on, we are quite frankly and candidly trying to build an innovation center in the city of Bowie in Prince George's County for kids and trying to change the way that education is infused with culture. What we are doing is we're working with corporate America. There's no reason why a child should look at MTV Jams all day or watch Apple Music all day, but not be able to interact with Apple Music and Apple Music not be able to sponsor them and change the way that they actually look at the creation of music and have their voices in the room as well to influence corporate America and some of the behaviors that are driving that media narrative for the Black community. There's no reason why we don't have those things. There's no reason why when you talk about competing at a more national level, or when you could talk about competing at a collegiate level, that Black children should not be able to compete at that level equally. And so some of the things that we are looking at is just building the center and inviting a lot of sponsors and a lot of the nonprofit world as well, because we recognize that as government officials, we don't have the answers. We just don't. And I don't think sometimes government does it very well, but I didn't say that. You didn't hear that. That wasn't from me. And I'm going to say I didn't say it. But what we are looking is to partner with as many of our nonprofit partners as much as possible in our corporate industry to bring that culture and just change the narrative so that children have a space to convene that is uplifting, that is inspiring. Okay, you want to start a business? You talking about Grubhub? Cool. Sit down in the room with the founders of Grubhub and let's map that out. What does that look like for your generation? How do we do that together? How do we change the culture? How do we infuse some of the stuff that you're seeing on media in there in a way that it's more educational and it's more beneficial for you so that you can prosper within the community? So those are some of the things that we're thinking about and we're working on.
Excellent. Well, look, ladies, thank you so much. We've gone an hour or so, and so I want to be mindful of everyone's time. We're entering the holiday season for many of us, and I do want to ask you in parting, before you leave us, give us just a few words of wisdom, especially to our mentees. And you've done that. You've given us a lot of words of wisdom, but I'm gonna give you an opportunity to close. If there's something maybe you didn't get a chance to talk about, something you didn't get a chance to mention, please take just a few minutes or so to close and give us some parting words. And I'll start with you, Ms. Richardson.
Men and Justin and Dr. Bunyan, it really has been an incredible conversation. I'm so inspired by the councilwoman. Justin, I am so inspired by you and really proud of you. And I think that's one of the things that we were just talking about, what we need to do and do more of. I mean, we have pride. I'm so proud of what young people are doing day in and day out. And we need to lift that up and do a better job of telling stories, educating our community and educating the broader world of all the beautiful Blackness, great talent that we have. And I just think that's incredibly important. I think my advice to Generation Z and all the mentees that are on here is know your power. You all are incredibly powerful. The work that you are doing in whatever lane and space you're in is incredibly important. You are innovating and you are teaching those that have come before you. Trust and be assured that I learn from you all every single day. And you all are not only innovating, you are inspiring others. And so don't discount that. I have the job I have today. I'm in this seat. I'm privileged to serve at the National Urban League because young people like yourselves took to the streets and said, this is not good enough. We want more, we deserve more, and we demand more. And so that's just what I think it's important to leave with. No matter what space you occupy, know your power, understand how important it is that you're there, understand that you have a huge responsibility whenever you are in the seat of power or position, or whether you're the first, or whether you're that one person that is representing our community. You cannot be silent. I know sometimes it's hard. You don't want to feel like you have to speak up for the Black community, the brown community, and everybody else. But if you don't, then who? And so, I really just encourage each and every one of you to know your power, own your power, use your voice, because the world is listening. The world is watching. So everything that you do, recognize it, that is positive, is for the overall service and betterment of all of us in this community. So just keep pushing, keep pressing forward, and reach for your dreams. Don't ever let anybody discourage you or tell you where there's a ceiling, what you're good enough to do, what you should be applying for or pursuing. Look, we can look at all the countless greats in our community that have been told those very things. Ketanji, Michelle, Barack. I mean, we can go on. And, they said, thank you, but no thank you. And they pursued their passions. They did what they loved, and they are successful because of it. So don't ever let anyone deter you or dim your light.
Beautiful. Councilwoman Ndeye Bumadu. Please give us a word.
That was perfect. I want to say thank you so much to 100 Black Men, Justin, Don, Dr. Bunyan, Jerica. Thank you so much for sharing the stage with me. This was absolutely phenomenal. And I want to thank a lot of you for watching. This was just a wonderful and remarkable experience where I learned so much from Justin, even the way that you ask your questions. You're just a remarkable young man, and I just cannot wait to see the things that you accomplish. I think there are 3 things that I want to leave the audience with. One is that I would love if one of you would be willing to mentor me. I'm always looking to learn from the next generation and understand where my blind spots are and some of the things that I can be doing better to advocate in the rooms that I'm in. So if anybody is interested in that and anybody has the bandwidth and the capacity, please reach out to me and be willing to mentor me and just share your knowledge with me so I can continue learning how to best support you and best continue to clear things out of your way so that you can continue to be successful. The second thing I will leave you with is trust yourself. Just keep trusting yourself. There are going to be so many obstacles that are going to come in your way that you're going to encounter that are going to possibly aim at knocking you down, that are going to just aim at just shooting things your way. And I want you to really just trust yourself, know that you are capable, know that you are confident, know that you are uniquely and divinely made and that you can and will do anything that you put your mind to. The last thing that I want to let you know is that it doesn't matter what room you are or not invited to. Pull a chair, grab a seat, and pull it up to the table. I really don't care how you get there, but make sure you do that. Because oftentimes we're not always invited. We're not always welcome, but it's our ability to get into those rooms and say what needs to be said on behalf of yourself or on behalf of the community in which you represent that determines the success of so many people to come. So I don't care if you are not invited. Please make sure that you continue to grab a chair, get a portable one if you need to, and bring it with you wherever you go and pull it up to that table and make sure that your voice is heard, like Jerica said.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much, ladies. Justin, what did you think? I told you we had some powerful star-studded panelists tonight.
Yeah, it's been a ride. It's been a panel, you both said some excellent things. From what I take away from that personally is just I'm also in a program called Diverse Male Student Initiative at Prince George's Community College, DMSI for short. And the mentor of that program, he tells us to shake the room when we walk in, he's real motivational. So I would definitely want to encourage everybody to, make a difference. You walk in the room, you want to show that presence. Don't feel undermined. Don't feel as though you're underqualified. You're you and you're that way for a reason, and you're still growing. We're all still growing. I'm learning every day. Everyone on this panel is learning every day. Just shake the room when you walk in and just, people will come to you. You'll get what you attract. And I know everybody on this call is just attracting amazing vibes. And so that's what will surround you. And
Well said, young brother. Well said. Shake the room. Well, look, thank you again for participating. I want to thank everyone who viewed tonight's town hall. I want to, again, thank the 100 Black Men of Prince George's County and our wonderful co-sponsor, Coca-Cola. Thank you for your support. If you want to see more programming like this, if you like the work that we're doing at the 100 and you're seeing the impact we're having, you can always support us, maybe just a little bit more. And that includes our members as well. So please continue to help us, continue to give. We really appreciate you. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. Those of you who are the Christian faith, happy Easter to all of you. And may God bless us all. May God bless our Prince George's County 100 Black Men. Thank you and have a great evening.
One last quick remark. Don't forget there should be a survey in the chat. So feel free to be encouraged to, fill out this survey and let us know what you think.
Great. Good night.
Good night, everyone.